also advise you and to note that each of the fire districts have also obtained a fire suppression rating schedule classification assigned by the Insurance Services Organization, or the ISO, as both Class 2 and or Class 3 rated departments. This is important to realize that this also provides the taxpaying constituency a insurance rating on their properties. It measures the major elements of a community's fire protection system and develops a numerical grading called a public protection classification. The ratings assist insurance companies in establishing appropriate fire insurance premiums for residential and commercial properties. Out of approximately 12,000 departments nationwide that have been surveyed by the ISO, the fire services of the City of West Haven collectively rate in the top 35%. We believe that you will witness, as demonstrated by the following presentation, that the collaborated efforts of the 3 fire districts in West Haven have met and will continue to meet its mission goals in sworn duty in protecting life and property. We also trust that you will realize that we have attained a highly effective emergency delivery service through the most efficient financial parameters as provided by your board and the taxpaying electorate, as we remain committed to the overall city's fiscal improvement. Thank you for your attention.
Good morning, Secretary McCaw, members of the MARB. My name is Steve Scaffarello. I'm Chief of the West Shore Fire District, and I'm going to talk about the first slide in our packet. So Secretary McCaw stole a little my thunder. She kind of outlined how we got here. Kind of all started with that ESI report, showing some of the unfunded liabilities of the 3 fire districts. After working with some of the members, Kim Kennison, Mike Walsh, after several meetings, we put together a plan on how we were going to address these things, both long and short term. As you can see from the slide, the report identified that there's no material expense savings in consolidating. But they did point out that we have some ways to do better financially. We had a pension deficits and other post-employment deficits that we are going to show you how we address today in this PowerPoint. But one of the big concerns was how the fire district's going to function if we don't get a tax increase from the independent side. And how are we going to take care of our deficits? So, in the short term, as you can see, the annual budgets will become more volatile. And in the long term, we could face the prospect of insolvency if steps weren't taken. So I think we addressed both of these concerns. Our annual budgets, if anything, have become more supportive in the last few years. Our budgets have passed with 1 or 2 no votes and 100 yes votes. So we have support of our constituents, and so for the long term, we had several headings that we needed to address. Pension, OPEB were 2 of the big ones, and so I'm going to turn it over to Chief Jimmy O'Brien, and he's going to take you through what we've done to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Scaffarello. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for having us here today. On the next slide, it's the Tri-District Cooperation.
I think you're on mute, Chief.
Hello. Thank you, Chief Scaffarello, and good morning to everyone, and thank you for having us here today. Sorry about being on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. On the next slide, Julian, if you can bring that up. So it's titled Formal Tri-District Cooperation Begins. I'd just like to open with, the Tri-District Cooperation has gone amongst us for many years, long prior before the MARB and the city started discussing the city's finances. But since then, it's just expanded to the financial side, which we've all benefited from, and we've learned some valuable lessons. So, that being said, some of our accomplishments, both recommendations from this board and from the ESCI study, will reflect throughout this presentation. But one of the key ones that we were able to accomplish together was to form a Tri-District Fire Commission. That has been established, and they have had regular meetings on a quarterly basis. So I believe they've had 3 or 4 meetings. So getting that established and having them meet and open discussions amongst each other is very critical, and I anticipate in the future that's going to create cost savings in the long run. January 2021, City Council adopts a creation of an OPEB trust. The City Council created the OPEB trust for the Allentown Fire Department, to which they have oversight. The West Shore Fire District and the Center Fire District, our Board of Fire Commissioners did the similar actions. We formed an OPEB trust, we registered it with the state, and we are allocating funds into that trust as a result of forming those, probably around December or January. As a result of the MARB's presence in the study, we have regular discussions with the mayor, the finance director, the OPM liaison, and I gotta say Mike Malone. Mike's been very helpful with us. Mike's been very informative, and Mike's been very patient, and we appreciate his efforts. And Kim Kennison also. Kim really helped us at the beginning, trying to absorb the complexity of these studies and what we had to do on the financial side. So we continue to do that, and we continue to work together. Combined firefighting EMT training. We've tried to work together as 3 fire districts, and we train together. We train together. We do our medical training together. As Chief Terenzio stated earlier, we try to work across boundaries to work as one unit when answering the calls from the community. We even have an elementary school in town where the Board of Education has allowed us to use. It's not being used as a school any longer, but for other things. And they gave us a classroom for the times when we want to train all 3 districts in a classroom together. In addition, we have the New Haven Fire School right on our border, which we all go down to on various occasions to, again, train together. Joint purchasing process is established. We've always looked to try to have some common purchases together, whether it be hose or equipment. If one department's ordering hose, we'll try to piggyback on that and order that together to save money and be more efficient. One of the big obstacles is the next one, standard SOP and SOG policy manuals. We have 3 districts, 3 departments, and we work so closely together. We now sit down on a regular basis to provide SOPs and guidelines for our members, so it's consistent across the board for all 3 districts. And one of the big examples I can give you is COVID. When it hit us last February, we had the unknown. So the 3 districts, along with the union and our health department, all got together, and we made sure that we were on the same page, and we vetted out what the best practices would be. And we do that with everything we do as a joint effort from the 3 districts, including back in, I believe, 2010, the 3 districts banded together to make sure our fire marshal offices all work together on the same format. We have SOPs for that, and we have agreements across the board with the 3 districts and the state of Connecticut that we can operate 3 departments, 3 fire marshal's office as one in one community, and that was quite an achievement. Says, establish joint grant application procedures and enhancing opportunities as a regional entity. What that is, the AFG grant, which is Assistant to Firefighter Grants, or FEMA grants. And each individual department has the ability to apply for grant money for whatever equipment or training they may need. In our case, we're able to take the 3 districts, apply for a grant together, and it classifies as a regional grant, which enhances our chances of being successful. Currently, the 3 districts, under Chief Terenzio and Allingtown's support, submitted a grant for SCBA's for the 3 districts across the city. That grant is still in the process, but it's just another example of how we work together to meet our needs. So some of the next steps we're looking to do is finalize a selection of single-source apparatus supplier for the Tri-District. And what we're trying to do with that, and Chief Terenzio will speak a little more on that in a minute, is trying to, as we order apparatus, instead of doing it separately as 3 different departments, we're trying to get a plan together where we find a single-source vendor that we can make purchases over in the next, say, 3 years. So if we need 3 or 4 pumpers or a ladder truck, if we can work together, there's probably some considerable savings if we can work together for, again, one vendor. As far as revenue expansion, we have for many years worked together to try to bring in revenue to offset our tax base. One of those things we do is a rescue billing, or bundle billing as we call it. Rescue billing is if we run a scene and we're there for a considerable amount of time, and one example would be if we're on I-95 with a major truck accident or something to that effect, we're up there for several hours and we use multiple tools and equipment. There's a format for us to bill the insurance company of the trucking companies to bring back some revenue for our and replace the equipment and in time there for the firefighters. Bundle billing is the same principle, but that's with our EMS. So if our medics are riding in with the commercial ambulance, or we're riding in with seriously ill patients to the hospital, again, there's a matrix of what we can charge the insurance companies to recapture some of our overhead. Again, we're looking to we evaluate it on a regular basis. Our first responder responsibilities relative to bundle billing, and we're constantly monitoring that. Actually, the 3 districts together put out RFPs for one single company to do our bill collecting. We vetted several companies. We determined which company was best for us, and the 3 of us signed on. And that company is monitoring our billing, and since that has occurred, our bundle billing rates of return have increased drastically. So that was a good partnership there. Review and evaluate current fees. That's something that's being considered. I mean, our fire marshal fees and our inspection fees probably are a little lower than industry standards, so we'll be looking forward in the near future to bring those back up to, again, our neighboring towns. So as you can see, these are some of the highlights. There's many more things that we do together, but again, these are the points that we think are relevant to this committee.
Chief, could you touch a little bit on that paramedicine initiative that you have all talked about and variations of opportunities that presents?
Yeah, there's another, I'm sorry, I did skip that, I apologize. So community paramedicine is something that's up throughout the country, but not really in the Northeast yet. And we're hoping to get legislation pushed through the state of Connecticut in the near future to enable us to explore that possibility. So community paramedicine is another component to our system that we currently run. And what that would do is, community paramedicine, the paramedics can go out into, again, the community, into the homes for patients who need to be evaluated for slips and falls, or if they need to be monitored for their blood glucose, wound care, anything, post-surgery, when they go home, rather than go into a facility, they go home and the medics can go there and, again, address their needs and come up with a plan for them to get them stable. And once they're stabilized, usually the visiting nurses would come in and take over after that. This concept is very successful out west and now down south, and we're monitoring it and we're planning. If we get the approval to do it in Connecticut, we want to be in the forefront of that and see, again, how much money that would generate, or revenue that would generate by the insurance companies. For them to pay community paramedics to go out into the community, into the homes, and take care of these patients and these citizens, whatever they're paying the community paramedics is a far lower price that they would pay for in a facility, inpatient facility. So those are the things we're looking at amongst others, but I really think community paramedicine is the future. It's not going to be a huge moneymaker, and it's not intended to be a huge moneymaker. It's intended to alleviate some of the pressures of the emergency rooms. It's designed to free up beds in the hospital, and it's more importantly to get people home in their comfort zone and be able to be treated by professionals and with loving care and proper protocols. And to go along with that, obviously, we can build the insurance companies, and they have been open to this. Exactly, I believe the insurance industry was critical in promoting this style of post-medical care. So hopefully, our future will see community paramedicine in Connecticut. And that concludes my portion. Any questions? We good? Okay, Scott.
Next slide.
Hi, Chief Scaffrello. I'm going to talk to you about the fund balance stabilization page of our
There may have
PowerPoint.
been a question.
Oh, sorry. We can't hear it very well. Can you turn that up, Mike?
Tom?
For me?
Okay, thank you,
Yes, for
Secretary.
you, Chief.
Yeah, my question was for Chief O'Brien.
Yes.
Do any of the districts transport patients, ambulance service, or are you just providing the paramedic additional first responder service?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. So we are not the primary transport organizations in our area. That's a private ambulance company. We do ride in on a life-threatening call, an ALS call. Our medics would ride in, which is billable. We do transport. We have the capability if the commercial ambulance is not available per se, and we cannot wait any longer, we can transport. Those are billable to the insurance company. So we do not hold the license to transport, although we could petition to get that back. But right now, bundle billing is strictly when we ride in with the commercial ambulance, or if we transport when they're not available.
Okay, great, thank you. One additional question, and that is, do any of the districts presently charge a plan review fee for more significant developments that require fire marshal sign off on
Collectively.
plans?
Yes, we do. And what we did when we before we had this agreement together from, say, 2010, all three districts had different rates and different percentages. So Currently, we have the same fees for inspections and for plan review. And those are the things that we're gonna look at to see if, perhaps we can boost those fees a little bit, but, yeah, we do that for the plan review
In inspection.
and inspections.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anybody else?
So,
Career head, Steve.
Sure. So, I just wondered a little bit, and this is just a couple of, since we have these collaborative meetings, is there a set agenda for these meetings? How do they work?
Well, yeah, generally, it's both. It's informal and formal. Informally, we'll discuss whatever's trending at the time and to see if there's a opportunity to meet. And if we do, the chiefs get together and we'll talk about what it is we can work together on. And most importantly, for the OPEP part, Mike Malone's been very good at setting up meetings with us, as well as Mayor Rossi and her staff bring us in to the discussion when it comes to the, setting up the OPEP or paying for the, how we're addressing our pension and so on and so forth. So I just think it's a little bit of both. It's formal and informal.
Quarterly meeting or bi-monthly meeting? It's just whatever you
Is it-
Well,
is it the tri-district he's talking about?
The tri-district board has established itself as to meet quarterly. But they also have a provision that they can meet within certain parameters. They can meet on an emergency basis earlier, but at a minimum, they would meet quarterly. We do, as you know, the city council meets twice a month, and the Board of Fire Commissioners for each district meets monthly on all certain days. Allentown's Board of Fire Commissioner meets, my commission meets once a month, as does West Shore.
It just seems that the three piece where the people who are the best proponent to get yourselves in better financial shape. So I think it's great to continue working together. The other question I have is, with some of your joint purchasing, what type of percentage savings do you feel you might be able to reel up?
What do you think, Tim?
Well, the trucks, we're gonna see significant savings
It's hard to
each purchase.
pinpoint a definitive percentage because of the structure of pricing for equipment and certainly the apparatus. But we feel that if we can jointly purchase from one manufacturer for our apparatus, we can see a significant savings. We buy 5 or 6 fire apparatus over a 3-year period. To us, that's a lot. To the vendors, maybe not so much, but there is quite a bit of savings, and even like today, it's hard to even pin down the manufacturers on the cost savings. Unfortunately, post-COVID, the parts and the prices are driving up, so we're trying to pin it down a little more, but I think we can save, and I'm gonna take a guesstimate, a couple $100,000, maybe. Was that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
My next part of that question is realizing that there's a need to work on the pension issues. Is there a way, and I'm not sure about the accounting on this, but just a suggestion, we might want to look into it when the chiefs get together with your finance people. Perhaps that 200, estimated 200,000, that is that much, or if it is that much, whatever it may be, maybe that could be the savings or whatever savings that you can realize could be somehow filtered into adding towards or mitigating your pension issue.
yeah, absolutely. I think that along with any other revenue that comes in, I believe our boards and the city are taking that to heart, that we need to address our OPEB and our pension. I think you'll see it through the presentation that over the last few years, we made a significant change and contribution to that. And if we do have surplus funds, I trust that those items will be a priority.
Madam Chairman, can I just,
Segue to the case of communication, people want to dig into the pension issue.
I can't hear you.
We'll take that into the pension issue.
Madam Chairman, can I just add one thing?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, can you hear me?
Yes. I just,
That statement. You echo the remarks of Signal. What a lot of organizations will do is they will adopt surplus investing policies. So that's where a portion of
That's me.
surpluses go back and paying out pension debt. So the state of Connecticut obviously has a volatility cap where a certain amount above and beyond, a reduced fund threshold goes and pays out pension liability. So one way to formalize this is to not just have it kind of be on an ad hoc basis, but to actually adopt the policy so that it actually continues beyond, the longevity of the current leader. That should be one thing that the city considers, is to actually formalize use of surplus, use of efficiency cost savings for reinvestment back into the pension to further address the unfunded debts. All right, Michael, you want to comment on that?
thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to have the chiefs augment something relative to the question that Mr. Falsigno asked. He asked about the savings estimate through joint purchasing, but there's a whole host of other benefits that they identified, and I'm just going to ask you if you could to look at page 7, and then I'm going to ask one of the chiefs to just explain a little bit more about the efficiencies and the spillover benefits of being able to have this uniform purchasing policy, specifically when they're buying heavy equipment, which they're about to do, and the benefits of the additional benefits of that. So I don't know which chief, but I was hoping you could.
I think
The joint apparatus purchasing on
Scott
page
has the
7.
next page.
Yeah, we're moving to
Page 7.
joint purchasing. Again, I'd like to add to Chief O'Brien's comments regarding joint purchasing. And as you all may or may not know or realize, one of the most expensive pieces of equipment for us to meet our mission goals are fire apparatus, which typically are to last 15 to 20 years, depending. And I would also like to give you the benefit of my perspective of coming in from the outside this past year and working with these two fine gentlemen that helped me protect this city in our district. They definitely demonstrate a cooperative measure because, as you'll notice, bullet point number 3, individual department preferences are being abandoned and will be replaced by a single source for fire apparatus. Now, we're using the fire apparatus because typically today, and especially in the financial climate created by the pandemic, these apparatus, just for a typical pumper that you see every day on the road, which is the workhorse for the fire service, they're coming in at prices of $600,000 and $700,000 for a piece of equipment. Together, the three of us have identified we need to come up with a process where, and again, I may also add, for those of you that may or may not understand the desire of firefighters and their apparatus, it's the single most prevalent demonstration or sign of a firefighter's pride is their apparatus. And the myriad of things that you can do with apparatus today can drive the cost significantly higher. So that bullet point number 3 is very important for you to understand. As we answer Mr. Falsigno's question, yes, there are a lot of other things that we are purchasing that we are realizing at cost savings. And by going to a single supplier, we're going to try to exercise the cost consideration benefit of a vendor when we're buying multiple, and in this case, multiple apparatus. We have also all signed on to the HGAC, the Houston Galveston Area Consortium, as end users, which the city also is a part of Sourcewell. Typically, that translates into sometimes 10 to 15% cost savings because it's a contract that vendors get involved with. But we are also right now in the throes of negotiations with a few major apparatus vendors because the City of Allentown Fire Department, we have a $571,000 grant ready to be used towards the purchase of a piece of equipment, but we've got an extension through the federal government not to exercise that contract just yet because we're waiting for a decision on both the other districts as to their needs, and we are developing, and it's almost near completion, a standard vehicle type from one vendor for the combined fire services of the city of West Haven. And it's a generic thing, and if Allentown wants to spend, or if West Shore wants to spend a little bit more for a little nuance for that particular piece of equipment, we can do that. But the general cost will be held together. So moving down, right now, this is also indicative by that the independent preference is being dropped because currently in the city, we have 10 major pieces of equipment that are made by 6 different manufacturers. That tells a large story because who likes Ferrara, who likes Pierce, who likes Smil, there's at least 10 to 12 different manufacturers of fire equipment. Now these rigs are supposed to last us 15 to 20 years depending on use. The city of West Haven is starting to see an increase slightly as came out of the ESCI report. We've all increased in our runs by about 2.7 to 3%. Now that starts to weigh a toll on our apparatus. But we're trying to reduce the 6 different manufacturers to 1. And I think you could all understand without me boring you with the amount of benefits that we can get with that, but obviously we can then go to the same vendor and increase our parts purchasing power and have a larger stock inventory. That will also enhance our responsibilities and operationally through joint training. And very often, and it just happened prior to my arrival here, the Center District was borrowing a piece of equipment from the Allentown District, but it was a different piece, so we had to go through a training of their staff to understand how that works. With a single source, it's again seamless because you train on the same, if Center District trains on the same piece of equipment, they can simply borrow ours and also be acquainted with it. It fosters a better collaborative effort. But from my perspective, and I'll end it with this, coming in from other operations and disciplines for being in the fire service for longer than I want to admit, I'm just not ready to stop. But when I first arrived here, knowing what the structure of the City of West Haven Fire Services was, it's like it's one department already. The fostered work collaboration was amazing. And having witnessed the operation at one of our first major fires, which we all, by the way, respond to support each other in establishing a command post, I thought there was 3 different departments here. There are, but they operate as one. And we intend on doing that with the fiscal portion of it as well. And as Chief O'Brien alluded to before, we have reason to believe that we may be quite successful in a $481,000 federal request to purchase SCBA's, the tanks we wear on our backs. All of us collectively have 57 of them that need to be replaced. So as Chief O'Brien already alluded to, we're going to do a joint purchase on that. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but we have reason to believe we're going to get it. A $481,000 grant to purchase 57 Scott Air Pack and bottles and collectively distribute amongst the three of us. And that was done through a regional process, as he just explained. And the only reason I know this is because the federal government doesn't usually reach back out to an applicant and ask for a little bit more information and clarity unless you are in the hunt and are probably going to get the money. So, again, I will end my portion of this presentation. It's not just the apparatus. We're using the apparatus because it's the single most expensive piece of equipment in which we need to do our job, and we are doing it together, and we are dropping our individual department preferences. As being an old firefighter myself, nothing more exciting and a demonstration of our pride than our apparatus. So, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may,
First of all, thank you with respect to your joint apparatus purchasing. I have direct person experience with helping the Hartford Fire Chief replenish the fleet, if you will. These are significant and costly investments for the replacement of the apparatus. And certainly the fact that you are combining your strategy for purchasing into best practice, whether you can quantify the percent savings or not, the fact that you are doing this jointly and securing a contract with a vendor to make these purchases should be resulting in cost savings. The second thing I would know is the fact that you are jointly pursuing the AFG grant with the feds helps you to demonstrate the dire need for reinvestment that is a citywide view and something that the feds will likely look upon more favorably in consideration of your application. So with respect to those two progress points, they are certainly well recognized, but reflect financial best practices, and obviously the extent to which you do achieve savings, you probably have some areas of reinvestment. I do want to move our presentation along today, given that we're at 10:48, and there are some other areas of your deck that we're interested in learning about, such as the underfunded pensions. So if we could continue to the next item on your PowerPoint, that we'd really appreciate it.
So that is balance,
Fund balance stabilization.
Chief Scaffer.
Hi, Chief Scaffarello. We want to talk to you about our fund balance stabilization page. We can bring that up. Okay, so as you can see the chart, our fund balance comparison from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 20, we've increased our fund balance across all three districts. And some of the reasons we were able to do that, we've budgeted conservatively. We've had some issues with our motor vehicle tax and our pilot funding being taken away for several years. And so we had to adapt to that, but through budgeting, and you can see that we were able to get a grant for our motor vehicle funding. So just a quick background, the state had passed a motor vehicle cap. Cities couldn't charge more than a certain mill rate. So, we budgeted our grant list, let's use 10 mills. And then when that law was enacted, we were only able to take 8 mills against our motor vehicle grant list. So that cut our revenue quite a bit across the three districts. The state, with our representatives, were able to secure a grant from the state to make up that difference. So that helped us out. That helped us with our fund balance stabilization. So that when I talk about conservative budgeting, that's how we were able to put that money in there.
You didn't budget it though.
Right, so, by not budgeting that money and finding cost savings, we were able to put that money in our fund balance by keeping our budgets. I guess what I'm trying to say is we didn't put, for my district, $300,000 into our budget. So that, through cost savings, and that's how we're able to put the grant money into the fund balance. So our multi-year operational financial plans were developed, and we have some amendment, in our appendix page, you can take a quick look at that. If we can go to appendix number 1. We have our 3-year plan on here.
Appendix 2.
There we go. Oh,
Appendix 2.
yeah, appendix number 1, there we go. Okay, so all 3 districts, we put together a 3 and a 5-year plan. For Allentown did the 5-year plan. West Shore and the Center did a 3-year
Appendix 2.
forecast.
It's Appendix 2.
So one of the big problems or the big questions for the fire district stabilization was how are the districts going to handle if you didn't get a tax increase? So you could look out across the board here and you could see our forecast for mill rate increases are very small going forward. Having the ability to plan and put money away for major purchases and pension and OPEB, that ability to plan has really shown how it's going to play out in the next 3 years, or 5 for Allentown. And you guys can take a look at this. I'm sure you'll have some questions, and it might be easier for me to answer your questions than go line by line on this in the interest of time, as Secretary McCaw indicated.
Mike, I've got a question. I noticed that each of you had fund balances over 20%. Is that level going to continue over the next 3 years? You're going to be in the 20s?
So no. I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
I am finished.
So no. So one of the things that we're going to talk to you about today is what we're going to do with the money. The reinstatement of pilot money and the motor vehicle grant money is how we're going to use that money. And some of that money is going to be used to handle the problems we talked about earlier, funding our OPEB trusts, funding our pension funds. And I'm going to talk to you about pensions on the next page a little bit, but how we're going to fund our apparatus, how we're going to fund our capital improvement budgets are all going to come from this money. So the short answer is no, it will not be in the 20s.
The potential grants, pilot funding, and so forth, are that baked into your, to this appendix 1?
Appendix 3.
So, in appendix 3, the impact of our potential state aid. Mike, answer that question for you. So this is our state aid, which is not in our budgets. So we made this separate slide for you to see.
Chief, the additional state aid that you are receiving based on the enacted budget, is that reflected? Are those additional revenues and your assumed mill rates, are they reflected in the forecast in appendix?
No, ma'am, they're not.
And again, if, I think this is the right time to talk about it, but I have never dealt with the notion of a fund balance that might be too big. And is there any plan to, and again, I'd like the OPM to weigh in on this as to prudence.
Want me to chime in on the money? Scott, want me to chime in on why we don't put it in the line?
I'm having a hard time here.
And accept the, a lesser fund balance as some like.
So I had a bit of a hard time hearing all that. I heard you say that you've never had to discuss a fund balance that was overfunded. Would that be accurate?
20% of expenditures.
Right. So I'm gonna let Chief O'Brien answer that question. He has some background on that. Chief, if you would.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. White. So, how we got the fund balances to where they are today is, our budgets are seen or voted on in May, thereabouts, and set forth. So, we do not put in our budget potential funding from the state of Connecticut. And we don't do that because we're not positive it's ever going to get here. So we don't budget that. When the state passes their budget, ours is already done. So when that money does come in, and it is in into our financial accounts, we put that into the fund balance for our districts. So that money there is for, again, the OPEB, the pension. That's what we started, that's where we got that money from, as you'll see later on. When, from my department, we put $500,000 into our pension last year. We got that money from our fund balance from the state grant funds. Now, when we get we're being told that the pilot money will be coming our way this year. Pardon?
I think we're having some challenges here, but we're hearing from the chiefs is that due to the timing of the state passing their budget and the timing of when the fire district has their budget passed, when they don't have a confirm of what the increased state funding level is, they're not building that into their budget, so they're tucking that into fund balance.
Correct.
However, one of the clear next steps, and the chiefs are touching upon this at the surface in terms of here are the types of investments we like to make in Apparatus. Yes, we're meeting our AZAC, we want to make supplemental payments, we're creating an OPEB trust.
Did they not hear me?
I
thought so. They don't hear me?
We can't really hear him.
Maybe from my ear. Consideration the most recent valuations that shows a 30-year projection of your ADAX and how that is improving your funded status, coupled with the additional resources you're receiving and the extent to which you want to invest more into the pension payments, into the OPEB payments, and your apparatus. And I think that is one of your next steps, is to kind of bring these pieces together, show the additional funding that cannot make this requested, and how you'd like to invest it, and how it's going to ultimately achieve those longer-term goals, which is to increase the long-term sustainability of the pension funds, make progress. As far as how RPMC make money well,
We can't hear her.
You guys get that?
Jim, everybody here should.
I've turned it up.
Everybody mute while she's talking.
Yeah, we're all muted.
as far as how RPM sees a fund balance of 20%, that is a very healthy place to be. In fact, the Government Finance Officers Association recommends a fund balance of 15 to 20%. So that's a good, many municipalities don't ever get there, but you are there. So now, you have to now begin to look at your areas of risk and begin to really put your emphasis on your areas of risk. And pension and OPEB are your greatest areas of risk, which is why you've got to get to this next step of how to take these additional revenues you're receiving and these efficiencies and layering that into a financial plan that shows the solvency of the pension fund and your OPEB commitments.
Agreed.
Thank you, Secretary, that's exactly what we're trying to say. So the next slide would be about our pensions. And that's going to have the heading of critically unfunded pensions.
Slide number 5.
That'd be slide number 5, Julian, if you would. Here we go.
So just hit the highlights, she said.
Okay.
Make it
So,
Make it quick.
we're meeting our ADC. All three districts have committed supplemental contributions, as you can see. We took the advice of the ESCI study. We're all using a company called Milliman to manage our actuaries. Milliman has put together a great strategy. I can speak on behalf of my district. We have a 30-year funding level strategy in West Shore. We no longer have to put any additional money into our pension fund. We're currently putting $2.7 million in there, and that's what we're going to do for the next 30 years. So it essentially has taken away the deficit. Milliman is doing the same thing for Allentown and the Center District. In time, you'll see that they'll have a level funded strategy for each of their districts. And essentially, West Haven has had the stigma of unfunded pensions in the fire service. I feel that will be going away. And then, all but 6 of my firefighters are in the Connecticut Municipal Employees Retirement System, which is funded. We have no deficit for that. And I feel that we're all moving in the right direction. Chief? I'm sorry.
No, we're in MERS too.
Yeah, both the Center and West Shore are in this State of Connecticut Municipal Employees Retirement System. Allentown is basically out of the pension business, as they're in a 401k for all their new employees. And I don't know the percentage, Chief Terenzio, how many members are on 401k currently versus defined benefits, but it's very small.
10.
So, yeah, 10 of the 20 are in, on 401ks there. So, West Haven has done a great job as a whole, getting out of the pension business, funding our deficits. All three districts have funded and started OPEB trust for growth. So I feel that we've addressed the large items that were identified in the ESCI
I think I might.
study. And Frank Chaplinsky's going to jump in and talk a little bit about finance. So also Chief O'Brien wants to make a comment.
Mr. White, to your point, and I certainly can't speak for the Center or for West Shore, but for Allentown, the expectation is the additional revenues that are coming in from the state that were not
2009.
part of the original
07.
budget or plan.
We went to MERS.
The expectation is those monies
You
would
get it all in your head, then
primarily
you
be
get up
used
there
to
and
fund
You start
additional
rolling.
contributions to the pension plan. It would be imprudent for us to receive these monies and only grow the fund balance without addressing the liability that faces the department. So, at least from the Allentown side, and I know I've spoken with the other chiefs, that is a primary focus of kind of this extra revenue that's coming in, not to jeopardize the operations, but to where we can, without burdening the taxpayer, use that to address the liability issues.
Madam Chairwoman, if I could also chime in.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
Mr. White.
I'm sorry.
I heard support that. One of the things that you may want to talk about down the road is, once you identify this quote extra money, how much you're going to allocate pensions, how much to OPEB, how much to CapEx, and I'd like to throw another one in there, which is reduction of the mill rate. And again, you have to set the priorities of that, but that may be something that would be worth discussing if you can do it.
I agree 100%, thank you.
So if I may, Madam Chairwoman,
Chief, one moment, Scott?
what you say?
She said, hold on.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you to the fire chiefs and folks from West Haven for walking us through this. We've been looking at these issues for a long time. One of them has been the opportunities for efficiencies if the fire district's pension funds themselves were consolidated. I know we've thought about, is there some benefit to merging the assets in a way that can allow for a more expansive investment strategy? I think folks on the call know that, funding pensions is not just about the money you put in, it's about the money you put in and how you invest it to grow over time. So, I know we've talked about the possibility of that there being a formal study of that, so I'm curious to know if one of the chiefs could comment on that.
I'll take
I
that.
also wanted to just make a point about, to follow on the suggestion made about really kind of providing a more detail around what the specific funding levels are, what the projected contributions are, because there may be times, depending on different market conditions, where you can get more bang for your buck by putting any funds, over a reasonable threshold for the fund balance, or putting it toward OPEB versus the underlying unfunded liabilities, or, it really does depend on what the interest rates look like, what your capital needs are. So just, I think where the advice of this subcommittee and the overall MARB is going is that we want to make sure that the districts kind of look and can be very strategic and tactical with the resources that they have. There's some very important progress that's been made. I know that there's a lot of reference made to the ESCI report. That was before I joined as a designee, so I'd like to get a copy of that, as well as the valuations for each of the fire districts, because that will tell us a little bit more around, what the forecasted expectations are. So as we can talk about the consolidation piece for the management of the pension assets, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, Madam Chairwoman, I can probably touch on that if you like. So, right now, we are looking at opportunities for investment. To do it all as one would be problematic, but we're also looking to perhaps have a single investment agency or company that we'd all use, but in a separate sense. That's the way it's structured by our home rule and by contract. There is that philosophy that we discussed about increasing our risk to try to get more bang for the buck, but the problem with that comes in is we have built those funds gradually over time, and I think it's really difficult for us to take our achievements and put it at high risk. We do have a more conservative approach, but we are getting a good return each year. It's just going to be hard to explain to our taxpayers and/or our firefighters that we lost a chunk of our investment because we took a high risk. So we follow the advice of our financial planners, and I think one of the things that we could achieve is, I believe the city actually does have an RFP out right now for investment companies to look at the city as a whole, and if that does come through, perhaps the departments can look to RFP or to work with that company. One of the things that we'd like to point out too is going into MERS or the state plan. West Shore Fire Department and the Center Fire Department back in 2007 and 2009 took that approach to try to stop the trend that we were on with the traditional pension. So all new hires from that point forward are put into MERS, and that's fully funded. And as it's by statute, it has to be. What we're doing now is we're trying to address the pensions that existed prior to that. And there's where we come into the unfunded part, because the firefighters put in their portion on a weekly basis, and unfortunately, due to the caution of raising taxes, those line items were not properly funded collectively for years. And so we're trying to do that now. I currently have all new hires in MERS, and I have some members of my department who are in the regular pension that would like to join MERS. And we're hoping to move them over, but we're running into some problems with OPM and allowing us to do that. I think by making that action back in 2009, we in fact were fulfilling the wishes of the taxpayers to try to find a way to get out of the pension business. Now, grant you, from 2009 to now, it'll be another 20 or 30 years before we're totally out of it, but we stopped the old and we took a new approach. If we can get the 10 or 15 firefighters I have now that would like to go over to MERS into MERS, that will speed that process up, and we are exploring that. As far as extra money, yeah, I mean, the extra money, we welcome it. But in essence, it's not really extra money. Our community is 25% non-taxable. So when pilot money, payment in lieu of taxes, was cut back from 75% to 60%, and then from 60% to zero, that had a direct impact on our community. We're providing services for all these non-taxable entities, and our payment in lieu of taxes was arbitrarily cut to zero. That's why we've lobbied and advocated that we really need that help. We're a small community and we're densely populated, so we're very appreciative to everyone's efforts to reinstate the pilot money, and I think we will make good use of that in taking care of our prior commitments and take care of our OPEB, take care of our unfunded liabilities in the pension. I don't think I'm in the position right now, but we can in the future, of saying how much of that money is going to go, but I'm certainly, if and when that money is delivered, we will take that up, and it will be a priority, I can assure you. Any questions?
As well as to the rest of the members of your team there, we certainly appreciate the progress that the departments have made to date in the tri-district operation, as well as that you're making towards use of these funds to achieve long-term sustainability.
All right.
In the interest of time, I do want to schedule us to delve a little bit deeper in our next meetings based on the feedback of the committee. A couple of areas for follow-up. First, we'd really like to see these intentions on meeting ADAC, supplemental contributions to pension, and OPEB, as well as use of your reserves reflected in a financial plan. That should be linked to some documents on what this is going to do for your overall unfunded pension liability, how it's going to improve your funded status, so that we can have a better sense of what commitment you're making and the extent to which it's moving the needle and in what time frame. Secondly, based on Ms. Shaw's contribution, we'd really like to do some follow-up on your investment approach, allocation mix, and those particular strategies, and understand how the three entities are working together on that. And I'm sure that Ms. Shaw will certainly make herself available in between meetings to help support that. The third is a reserves policy being formalized that shows a long-term commitment towards use of excess funds above maybe a 15 or 20% fund balance, and how that will go back into paying down unfunded liability above and beyond your annual ADAC. Again, all significant best practices towards ensuring that you're able to meet the commitments to the employees. And then my team would be happy to do some follow-up with you on the MERS issue and any issues that you're having there with pursuing that particular item. So with that, if there are no further questions, we're going to conclude. We will add the follow-up to our next subcommittee meetings. We will delve a little bit further. Mention OPEB and apparatus strategy, and other questions, we're going to move on to a review of the ARPA funding overview and city priorities. Any other questions for the fire chief before we do that? Okay, excellent. And I am going to be turning this over to Ms. Kennison, trying to jump off for another commitment, along with our Madam Shaw is on as well. So over to you, Kim, and great job. Let's see if I can look forward to further work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Secretary.
I'm going to ask everyone to go on mute if you speaking so that we don't have the background backlash that's causing us some video issues today. The next item on the agenda is to talk about the ARPA funding overview and city priorities. Julian has provided us with a very nice overview of the ARPA funding. I am going to turn it over to you, since he did the heavy lift of pulling all of that information together, to walk you through his write-up on the ARPA funds. Julian.
Thank you. I'm also responding to somebody in the waiting room trying to get them, but I don't see them there. So if you see them, Kim, can you let them in?
Will do. Will do.
Thank you. Bear with me a moment. As Kim mentioned, there was a write-up with some background information on the American Rescue Plan Act and the funding allocated to local governments in your meeting materials. And there's over $1.5 billion dedicated for local government in Connecticut. About $690 million of that was originally allocated for counties. And due to the fact that Connecticut does not have a functioning county level of government, the decision was made to essentially direct that to the cities and towns. So there's a combined funding distribution table on that on the handout that shows each of the 3 municipalities that are under the MARB's oversight and how much they are getting, through both the municipalities allocation plus their portion of their respective county allocation. In this memo, you can see that West Haven, between the two sources or the two streams, is slated to receive about $29 million. The U.S. Treasury issued some guidance on the eligible uses for those funds. They issued an interim rule in May. They've issued some supplemental FAQ documents since then, and we don't have a date for the issuance of a final rule, but we know that the comment period for the interim rule is closed, and hopefully that final rule will resolve some or all of any remaining ambiguities in the rule. You'll see from the handout or from the memo that there's 4 broad categories of eligible uses. I'll just tick those off. The first category is responding to public health and economic impacts, and that's actually can be broken down into 2 subcategories. So there's a public health impact, which would include uses or spending on addressing or mitigating the spread of COVID, prevention, medical expenses. There's a series of eligible uses that fall under behavioral health care and mental health. In the economic impact section, this would apply to spending and measures that address the negative economic impacts of the public health emergency for both households and for businesses. And some of the eligible uses would be, assistance to unemployed workers, rental assistance, eviction prevention, loans and grants to small businesses, and especially aid that's directed to specifically impacted industries such as hospitality, restaurants, tourism. There is the second broad category that is pay for essential workers, and that's an additional premium payment for workers that fall under the category of essential workers
any witnesses?
Nursing home workers, workers involved in food production, grocery stores, restaurants, category for sanitation, janitorial workers, workers in transportation, transit, public health and safety, and so on. And those workers are eligible for an additional premium payment of up to $13 an hour. And there's a retroactive component for jurisdictions that wish to offer that, sort of looking backwards. The third category is the broadest category, and that essentially allows for expenses on government services and more general purpose capital projects. And I'm going to come back to this one because there's quite a bit of nuance to that. And then the last category is investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. A municipality can allocate its funds across those four categories as it sees fit, with the exception of the third category, which is that broad category for government services and capital projects. There is a cap portion of its ARPA funds that a municipality can direct to that third category, and the cap is based on the amount of revenue that it has lost as a result of the pandemic. And there's, in the 150-page internal rule issued by Treasury, probably 20 pages plus just dedicated to how to calculate the lost revenue. But it essentially boils down to 3 steps: establishing what your municipality's baseline revenues were, then applying a growth factor to which would represent what revenues would have been in the absence of the pandemic. And in the rule, that's referred to as the counterfactual revenue. And then comparing that counterfactual revenue to the municipality's actual revenue since the pandemic. And then the difference between those two, assuming that the actual revenue was less, would equate to the lost revenue. That lost revenue is the amount out of its municipality's total allocation that it can dedicate to this third, very broadly defined category of eligible uses. And there's a lot more to that calculation, but that's essentially how it approaches attempting to capture the lost revenue. And there are multiple points in time when that lost revenue is calculated. There are also a number of specific restrictions on the use of the funds that are listed on the third page of the memo. The funds cannot be used to offset a reduction in taxes. So a reduction in the mill rate, for example, and then using the funds to backfill the difference in property taxes collected, that would not be an eligible use. Deposits into any pension funds is not eligible. Replenishing fund balance or reserve accounts, payments for legal settlements, and any outstanding debt. And then with regard to timeline, the funds can be used to cover costs that are incurred after March 3rd of this year up until December 31st of 2024. And then as long as the funds have been obligated by December 31st of 2024, they may be expended up until December 31st of 2026. So there's time to plan and come up with well thought out strategies for how these funds are going to be deployed. And then the reporting requirements are shown at the very end of that memo. With in West Haven's case, the requirement will be 1 interim report due at the end of August, and then quarterly reports beginning in October. And then we invited, we're going to discuss this with each of the 3 communities at the subcommittee level, and each municipality is invited to share with us to the extent that they have planned this out, how they will utilize the funds to give us a sense of their priorities. Again, there's time to do this thoughtfully, and given some of the complexity of the eligible uses, especially under that third category, these plans are at different stages of development, and will continue to be shaped over some period of time. So I'll stop talking and allow the city and Michael, who has also been working on figuring out what that lost revenue amount is for the city as best we can at this point, to jump in.
Thank you, Julian.
Do I knock off the mic?
Michael, are you prepared?
Yeah, I am, and I'm gonna have to...
You're on mute, Mike.
Oh, yes, I am. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, with Julian's help, a lot of help, I think at least we've made a very good stride here in West Haven in terms of what I envisioned as the most important piece to start with, and that was to get our arms around what our revenue loss was. The more I talked to Julian and the more I read the regulations, the more complicated it got. The one thing that Julian mentioned, and I wanted to underscore, is that we can identify a significant amount of revenue loss, but the bottom line is that revenue can only be used in accordance with the eligibility guidelines established by ARPA. So one of the first frustrations I encountered is I had hoped that a couple of the priorities for the city could be infrastructure, obviously, and our unfunded liabilities. And it's clear that none of the money that we identify can be used for the unfunded liabilities. And while it can be used for infrastructure, it's got to meet those specific guidelines that are established by ARPA. It's not to say that we can't use it for infrastructure, but we have to be very judicious about how it gets spent. And so what that did was that kind of complicated the path that I was sort of creating for the mayor to sort of go down and start to look at. But the good news is that we know at this moment in time that we have been able to identify revenue loss well in excess of the $9.1 million that we will be getting in the first year of the ARPA funds. So at least we know that we will be able to identify eligibility of use of money. Then the next task for the mayor and her staff is to then identify what the priorities will be for the use of those funds. The thing that makes this a large amount of potential revenue is when we speak about revenue loss, it's not just one fund. As Julian made clear to me, we as a community are able to apply for revenue loss for all of our governmental funds. And in the case of West Haven, the governmental funds include the general fund, they include the Allentown Fire District, they include the sewer department, they include the capital improvement fund, and they also include all of the non-major funds that are also part of the governmental funds. The special revenue funds where we have grants and we have various units of government being paid for with special revenue funds, or just grants to support any number of things. So the magnitude of what we're looking at when we're looking at revenue across all of those five categories is, and I don't have the final number with me, but it's probably well into the $250,000, $300,000 range. So that's why when we look at revenue loss, we're able to at least identify and justify the fact that the city has, in fact, based on the criteria that Julian had outlined to you earlier, exceeded the $9.1 million that we're getting in the first year. So we know that we can cover it, and now the secondary part of this is for the mayor, as I said, and her staff over the next couple of months to decide how they want to allocate that on a percentage basis. And I think that one of the things that we obviously are going to look at are the programmatic areas of our government, and use those at least as a starting point for how we will be at least considering the distribution of the money. At least that's what I would advise her. And then obviously take it a step further and look at the other opportunities we have. Funds can be used for special districts. Funds can be used for third-party agencies, nonprofits, and also for the business community as well. So we have two pieces to this puzzle to look at, not only the internal needs of the city, but the external opportunities to help agencies that in many ways support the city, but don't get city funds either directly or indirectly. So what Frank and I have been doing is looking at some of what other communities have done in terms of starting to establish a plan, a model, to bring together all of these elements of the organization and the external community, come up with some way of at least beginning to identify the needs and the opportunities to use these funds, and then also to come up with some criteria so that when the money is distributed, it's based on some clear guidelines and expectations on the part of the city. The other part of this that I was going to mention is the fact that what we're realizing as we look at the analysis more clearly is, first of all, we have to meet our own expenditure needs. When we close out the year, we will probably have spent about $480,000 more on COVID expenses than the $1.2 million that the state provided us with. So I think the state gave us 1.2 and we spent about almost 1.7. So the first thing we're obviously going to look at is to make sure that all or most of that money can be covered with the ARPA funds. The other thing is that in the 22 budget, the city appropriated $1,575,000 to help balance the budget as revenue, okay? So there's a second draw on this money. So before we even look to draw down that $9 million, we want to cover the $480,000 from last year and the $1,575,000 that we appropriated as revenue in this year's budget. So those are a couple of the other things that we'll have to consider. Now, the good news is the city's going to get significantly more money in the pilot program, the tiered pilot. The mayor and the finance director did not budget any more money in that pilot account for this fiscal year than they did last fiscal year, not knowing what the ultimate increase was going to be. The ultimate increase is about $1.8 million. So that's another large amount of money that Frank and the mayor will have to deal with in terms of, do we take the $1.5 million from ARPA to meet that ARPA revenue, or do we use the pilot tiered money to make up that $1.5 million, and that way we don't have to draw it from the ARPA fund. So we want to first decide how much we're going to have available for the first year, how it's going to be used, and then obviously go forward with trying to come up with a plan to get as much feedback from those areas of government and outside of government that we know have needs and eligibility for these funds. But at least we know at this moment in time what our revenue loss is, and that to us was the most important piece of all of this, and that's the starting point from which we'll be able to build from.
Did you want to mute?
Thank you, Michael, that was very helpful.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I never know with all of these. Good morning, everyone. It still is morning, and thank you, Michael Malone and Frank, for looking into all of this. I'm still hearing an echo. Michael, did
I
you
know.
go mute?
Yeah, but I have my volume on.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
Yeah, sorry.
Good? Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay. And I do agree there, we still don't have the final ruling, and I don't think we have a date yet as to when we're going to get it, and that will be helpful too, because then we'll know that, all the guidance has been verified and is put out there. I do, actually, I haven't sat and talked to anybody, Frank, I know I've mentioned it in the past, but as far as I'm concerned, I think that we should use the pilot, the increase in the pilot to offset the 1.575 in the budget. I think that that's the best way, and again, and obviously I will talk to Frank and Michael Malone about it. I do agree too with the different categories. We have many nonprofits that suffered tremendously during the pandemic and don't have, are not up to speed yet and where they were. So again, how we decide that and what kind of program, because of course you want to be fair and, and go forward with a program. So that's something we're going to have to work out in the weeks to come. The good thing is we have plenty of time. I mean, they're not pushing it, but we do want to work on it because there are people that are hurting in our community, and we do know that. Additionally, and Lee Tiernan was here and he left, I am hoping he's coming back. Economic development is another big one for us, and we have at least had a lot of interest in economic development over the past few months, one of which a property on Beach Street, Chicks, I don't know how familiar anybody is with the old Chicks that is on Beach Street, had been closed for many years since the owner passed away. That property has since been purchased and has been reported out that that property has been sold, and with the partners that are involved. So we're hoping that that's going to be, a big catalyst down there, because we also, I had worked with state representative during the board to secure funding, and we were awarded $5.2 million to raise the road over there because of historic flooding issues, which again harms your ability to market that property, because if you put a business in there and it's going to flood every time we have a storm, that's going to be problematic. So we have that also. And also with economic development, what Lee Tiernan was looking at was that we have developers, one in particular right now, who is having a terrible time leasing property within his commercial part of his mixed-use building. So what Lee had talked about was, he calls it a 5x5. So in other words, and this is all still again on the drawing board, but for instance, if somebody's going to sign on a lease for 5 years, then we could do 5 months of leasing expense, waive it, and different, again, these are all in the infancy stages, but these are ideas that we have been looking at, because I do think West Haven economic development, I do believe that's a great path for us. We have seen a lot of growth. We do have another project that's right off of 95. It was the old Staples building that has been bought and already knocked down in the last few weeks, and they're going to put up a huge 7-Eleven with several restaurants in it right off of the highway. So there is now more interest than there was, but again, I would like to see even more interest with economic development, and if we could use this funding to, encourage that, I would. Lee's back in the room now, but I explained some of your 5x5, so I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
The mayor probably said this, I'll be quick, Madam Chair and members. So we weren't able to do as much as we would have liked to help businesses. Businesses definitely got impacted by COVID, and we're hearing from developers and others that, we have some empty storefronts, we have some restaurants that went out. So we feel, we're being told that this would be a real booster to allow for long-term lessees to establish themselves in West Haven and help out people that are investing in West Haven, and that's on the private side. So we're going to roll that program out, and we already have people that are interested in taking advantage. So I think it's going to be something that we can be proud of and a good use of COVID-related funds.
Thank you. So yes, and that is, I think it's going to be a good program, and I think it's going to be well received. And so again, we have to look at everything, like how much you're going to allot for this program, and that different things, and what it's going to consist of, but we will be going forward on that. And as I said, it's still a little difficult for us, I think as it is for all the municipalities that are getting town funding, is that because we don't have final regulations, so we want to make sure. I do want to thank Julian, because I thought that report was excellent. When I read it, I understood so much more than I did before, so he did an excellent job. I want to commend him on that, because it's greatly appreciated, because it's hard enough, going through all this stuff, but there's so many pages of everything that every day, it seems as though you get some emails on new instructions for the ARPA funds. So I do appreciate his help with that, because that was greatly appreciated. I think I speak for Frank as well, because that was a very, very helpful document. So I don't know, Frank, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think, one of the things that we'll do, or I'll do, is I'm a big believer in not rebuilding processes that other people have already developed. So to the extent that I can view other towns and the processes and the programs that they're using their funds for, I think that would be a decent groundwork for West Haven. I think the goal is obviously to get the full plan put together. I personally would like to shoot for, having something finalized with the council by perhaps October. To have all of that, all of those programs laid out and the timeframes around it. And then from there, we should be able to move forward with putting these funds to the best use possible. I'm sorry.
Mayor Rothstein was expressing gratitude to Julian. I said I wanted to add, we appreciate it.
Definitely. And I know that is a lot of work and definitely a lot of conferences and seminars that he's had to attend, as well as his own personal time and energy to try to get educated on these new regulations, so that we all can share on his knowledge that he's learned from this. So it's we're group, not just in that area. We need Julian, so we're definitely grateful for all of his help here. Any other comments or questions from the board members regarding ARPA and this part of the presentation? I do not hear any. Then we can move on to the next agenda item. And the next agenda item is other, if we have any other business that we would like to bring up today. Mayor, if you and Lee are still there, one of the items that I would look for a quick update, and it doesn't have to be formal, is the special taxing district. I know that you put in for that during session, and I was just wondering if we could get an update on that.
Yes, Ms. Kennison, Lee Tiernan again. So the governor did sign...
Wait.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute, Ms. Kennison. So the governor did sign the legislation concerning the special tax district for what we refer to as the Haven project. The mayor and I have been in consultation with a representative of the developer. I have a student lawyer in my office. We're going to be drafting an interlocal agreement for review by them, and they're going to probably use more high-priced counsel to draft, to review that. But in any event, we're going to move forward with that. I'm trying to target, we're not going to make, the next city council meeting is less than a week, so I'm not going to be able to have it on for there, but we'll try to target a review of that by the end of August meeting. And, oh, I'm sorry, I'm leaving you guys out. Obviously, once I have a document that's worth reviewing, I'll forward it up to you guys.
Appreciate that. That's all I have for other business. Does anybody else have any other business that they would like to do today? Or questions on? Yes.
I have a question, and I learned minutes late. I just wanted to make sure, were the minutes approved with changes to the heading? Because
They were.
said,
They were approved.
okay, because they had it said Hartford Subcommittee, and I think they meant last day, and I just want to make sure that was captured.
It was not captured, but if they did, we will make that correction.
Just a minute that reflected that the heading said Hartford, but the body referred to what Haven Subcommittee.
Good catch.
That's all I have.
All right, any other comments? Then can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting today? Thank you, Christine. How about a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. All in favor? I don't think we'll have any discussion. Aye. Three, I did not hear from Tom or Stephen, and I believe that, for the record, Pat Egan joined us as well.
Had to leave the meeting early.
Oh, okay, thank you. Did Stephen still stay with us?
He also had to leave early.
Okay, I see that, okay. Then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. This was a good, healthy discussion, so I appreciate your time.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Michael, could you get the microphone?